Martial arts is not just about fighting. There's more to it than that. There has to be. Are we defined by our nature or by who we choose to be? Can we be more than what nature decided for us? I have hope that that is true. In which case, there is only one obvious question. Who am I? And who do I choose to be?
Hello, I'm the teacher. And one of the first rules I have for my students is there are no wrong questions. Questions lead to curiosity, and curiosity leads to learning. So there are really no such things as bad questions or wrong questions, because any question that may seem bad or wrong will in fact lead to better questions later down the line and ultimately greater learning. We're going to start that off today by asking the question, what if Bruce Lee was in MMA? Now, as it currently stands, that kind of question is asinine. But it does lead to some interesting places. Most especially, what can impact a legend? A legend versus reality, and how much forms of competition can aid us in our journeys. But first we need to identify what sort of Bruce Lee we're talking about, because there's two answers to this sort of question. Are we talking about actual Bruce Lee, or are we talking about film Bruce Lee? The nunchuck-wielding, dragon-spirited legend. Well, not weighing too much and being about 5'8", he probably would sit about, one of the lighter categories of weight classes. And I imagine he would fare quite well, because even in his films, it was showcased that Bruce Lee had a certain amount of varied knowledge. Showcasing knowledge not just of basic punches and kicks, as he's known for, but also for various forms of grappling. So I think he would fare fairly well. Maybe even he would go as far as a title bout. Okay, video over I guess then. But is there a greater question to be had here? What happens when stuntmen enter the Octagon? Probably the most infamous example of this being Jason David Frank, who played the Green Ranger, White Ranger, Red Ranger, Black Ranger, did I miss any? On Power Rangers. Rest in peace. Participating in 4 amateur fights and 1 professional fight in 2016, all of which he won, cementing his title as a great fighter, and also probably leading to greater opportunities for him down the line. I mean, it's clear to understand why stuntmen and women will go into MMA, most especially because they have a solid martial arts training already, and long shooting days and various stunts require a certain amount of stamina and resilience to pain. So really it makes perfect sense for them to go into MMA, plus it would serve as an excellent boost for their career. So why do people not do it more often, and why does it more often go the other way, where former UFC stars or MMA stars will then transfer to film? Maybe we need to question the risk-reward system here. After all, places such as the UFC are known for dubious contractual negotiations. But there are other MMA circuits, so is it just contracts that are stopping more stuntmen and women from going into this sort of career? Or is it that once they've reached their prime years of doing stunt work, they've already aged out of doing something such as MMA and are probably already too injured or too worn in order to transfer then to MMA? Or is MMA too big of a risk given how high of an injury threshold there already stands as being within the sport? Oh, I got mood lighting now. But something about this line of questioning is just rubbing me the wrong way. I mean, it's kind of circular, isn't it? I mean, why do stuntmen not feature in MMA more? Because they've already aged out of being appropriate for MMA. Why do more MMA people go over to film instead? Because it's less risk averse. Okay, that's a fairly circular point, and what's really the point of me making this video? But there's the rest of the questioning which leads on from this. What about the legend of these various people? The legend of Bruce Lee. That's the figure that people want to see in MMA. Because let's be honest here, when it comes to people like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Donnie Yen, etc., they have these certain iconographies, these certain unbeatable statuses. It's sort of the same as the superhero argument, who would win in a fight between X and Y. It's why when martial arts stars feature in the same film, it often leads to greater eyes on it, because that's what people want to see. They want to see their favourite heroes collide, for whatever reason. Probably quite masochistic when you really consider it. Because martial arts stars, whether on or off the film screen, they are, after all, the closest thing to superheroes we have. Being able to do these near superhuman feats, being able to take on these extreme amounts of pain and high tolerances of stamina. And not to mention, they kick the behinds of the bad guys, save the damsels in distress, and overall have a good time doing it. That's all the language of film. When it goes to the Octagon, it's an entirely different story. Or when these figures face off, someone has to lose.
And the bullet bounced off it. It might accidentally hit someone else. We don't want that to happen, do we?
And doing that will counteract the legend of these figures, so does anyone actually win in this case? I'm reminded, of course, of the example of Jet Li vs Jackie Chan in The Forbidden Kingdom, whereby it was more of a stalemate and they became allies through it. The fight was stopped before an actual winner was called, because it makes sense. Why would you have your heroes fight each other and then prove one greater than the other? Then what would be the point of having the second guy around? But even so, whenever there is a superhero fight in comics and films, etc., someone does always win, and then the heroes that do lose are not seen as lesser overall by the wider community. Why is that? I'm reminded of a quote by Stan Lee, who spoke about when these superhero collisions happen, and how he and his fellow writers decide who will win. And his answer was that it was whoever they want to win. It's not about who wins, it's about how they win. Batman vs Superman is not as intriguing if Superman just uses his powers to quash the mortal Batman. It's made more compelling by Batman's intelligence and resilience, as well as his resources, that even the fight and end up making it more evenly matched. That's where the debate comes from. And if we compare the legend of Bruce Lee, the legend of Jackie Chan, the legend of Donnie Yen, of Jet Li, etc., having one win over the other, it's not as compelling. But if you describe how they win, it's much more interesting. Just saying Bruce Lee will win because he's Bruce Lee is a flat circular argument that ultimately leads nowhere. Bruce Lee's own fights in his own films, he never actually got away scot-free. He ended the fight with a few scrapes and a few punches, and it was seeing how he would win against these insurmountable odds, against these larger opponents, against these more powerful figures. That is what made the fight scenes compelling. That is what makes any fight scene compelling, and that's what makes an MMA fight more compelling, because oftentimes it's about seeing how these figures will win, not just they win because they win. Why does it feel as though I'm talking myself into circles? So what does this provide us with? The debate is fun, the legendary figures that always win all the time are not as exciting as figures that have to outthink their opponents and find a scrappy underdog way to win in reality as well as in fiction. Yeah, we all kind of knew that already, so what's the big takeaway here? These arguments of how Bruce Lee would do in a fight, of why he would win. Ultimately, whenever the how and why question comes up, it's not just about how much force he can put behind his punch. It's often about what strategy he will use, how he will utilise his abilities, how he will use his surroundings to his advantage. Sure, brute force has its purpose, but ultimately it will serve a limited purpose. A hammer can only do so much. It is often our mind which makes the difference. How we use what we have, how we use our surroundings, how we can outthink our opponents. Which, to bring it back to the first point, is why it is important to ask questions. Because the more we think, the more we learn, the better we're able to utilise our knowledge in action. If we learned anything from today's video, I'll let you be the judge of that. But now I want to hear from all of you. What is your take on all of this? Does it matter whether or not Bruce Lee wins in a fight? How would Bruce Lee actually fare in an MMA match? Are there any other examples of stuntmen going into MMA that I didn't cover? Rest in peace once again to Jason David Frank as well. And Kevin Conroy as well. They passed relatively close together. 1-2 punch, certainly. But ultimately remember, always ask questions. And until next time everyone, thank you for watching and peace be with you.